I'd like to welcome everyone out to our Law and Licensing Committee hearing. Let's do a quick roll call. Molly Hart, Rod Hall, Amanda Bollinger, and Board Member Lear, I believe, is on her way. And when she arrives, we'll record that she's present. Is there any public comment today? Okay, let's roll right into our first item. This is agenda item 1.2, Canyon Grove Academy waiver request. And Director Rasmussen, will you be presenting on this or summarizing it? Oh, that's the second time or fourth time I've done that, AAG Beal, and I apologize. I have to turn the other way.
No problem.
AAG Beal, would you like to introduce this matter?
Yes, so this matter is a waiver request coming under Rule R277-121 for a waiver of Rule R277-552-5 subsection 5, which is the requirement that the school report by October 1st for a small expansion. And this request is arising due to changes in the Utah Fits All Scholarship program that happened during the 2025 legislative session that made changes to, qualified providers for Utah Fits All. And so Canyon Grove is seeking a waiver for a small expansion so that they can add up to an additional 100 seats for the 2025-2026 school year. And they do have the approval and support of the State Charter School Board as well. And I believe Superintendent Goetz is available if there are any questions from the committee.
Thank you, AAG Beal. Yes, Superintendent Goetz is present. She indicated earlier that she would be happy to answer questions, but she doesn't feel it necessary to give a statement. But if we have any questions, she's happy to answer those. Does the committee have any questions? I know we discussed this thoroughly in review. So with that, we're ready for a motion.
I can make that motion.
Thank you.
I move that the committee approve Canyon Grove Academy's request for a waiver from Utah Administrative Code R277-552-5 and forward to the board for approval.
Okay, the motion before the committee is that the committee approve Canyon Grove Academy's request for a waiver from Utah Administrative Code R277-552-5 and forward to the board for approval. All those in favor? Aye. Seeing none opposed, that motion passes unanimously of those present. Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Goetz.
Thank you.
The next item is 1.3. AAG Beal, would you like to introduce the committee to that matter?
Yes, so this is a waiver request from Valley Academy Charter. They are requesting a waiver, again, under R277-121 for a waiver of R277-552-6. So same rule, just slightly different. It's the waiver of the October 1st deadline for a satellite school rather than an expansion. And this one arises basically out of a clerical error. I'm not sure where it happened, but Valley requested and put in for a request with the State Charter School Board all the information they needed for a satellite campus. It was approved in January of 2024, and the Valley thought it was for this school year. Later noticed on the paperwork that the paperwork was approved for 2026-2027, so they missed the October 1 reporting deadline. And so this is basically just to rectify that October 1 date. And I believe we have Director Stevens online and available for questions.
Director Stevens, do you wish to address the committee or just field questions?
I guess field questions.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like field questions. So with that, are there any comments or questions from the committee? Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, I think we're ready for a motion on item 1.3.
I can do that. The committee I move that the committee approve Valley Academy Charter's request for a waiver from Utah Administrative Code R277-552-6 and forward to the board for approval.
So the motion before this committee is that the committee approve Valley Academy Charter's request for a waiver from Utah Administrative Code R277-552-6 and forward it to the board for approval. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. So we have 4 votes in the affirmative, 1 abstention from Board Member Lear. That motion passes. Thank you, AAG Beal, and thank you, Executive Director Stevens. With that, let's move to the data sharing agreement, item 1.4, with Liz Bernfeld, and I believe Director Chalice is going to queue that up for us. Thank you.
Good morning, committee. Katie Chalice, Director of Privacy. I'll start by stating that for your information that Liz Bernfeld, the data requester here, is she's requesting the data in her capacity as a doctorate candidate, seeking it for her dissertation, but she is simultaneously a USBE employee. Also, you might remember Liz from her time as the legislative fellow 2 years ago. So that's kind of fun. And I believe Liz is online. Is that?
Liz, are you there?
No. 2 iPhones. Okay. Anything. Okay. So maybe I'll just say into the microphone that Liz, if you are online, maybe you could make yourself known via the chat.
Oh,
Okay.
so Liz, can you hear us? Oh,
Okay, great. All right, so I'll do a quick queue up for this data request. So this is a research data sharing agreement request for the committee's consideration. The nature or the topic of the study that Liz is exploring is how letters training for educators affects students' literacy skills, particularly measured by the Acadience reading test. And she's exploring cohorts of students in lower grades and only for LEAs that participated in letters training, which is an expansive number of LEAs. And I believe that is the extent of my summary, Chair.
thank you. Does the committee have any questions, comments? Seeing none? Okay, Board Member Lear.
Context, but can you tell me, Katie, how often does the board not so much have these requests as approve these? I know we have some doctoral students who make requests and kind of related or similar kinds of studies from universities, but is this particularly typical, or can you just give me a sense of that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. We receive maybe 2 to 4 requests similar to this each year, and the board has historically typically approved these types of requests from doctoral students. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, thank you very much. That is helpful. I should have asked you that earlier.
If there,
Just to put on the record, all de-identified.
Yeah.
Yes, according to our definition of de-identified. I will note that under FERPA, this has been a big topic of conversation among my team. Not to get into super nerdy weeds about this, but under FERPA, de-identified means that it could not be tied back to an individual student. At our agency, we use the term de-identified historically to mean that it has direct identifiers removed. So it's not, but yeah.
So it has direct identifiers removed, correct?
I believe so. Let me just check really quickly.
It appeared to be.
Student underscore ID is the identifier being used, and that's USBE's unique identifier.
And I, one more.
Please.
So this, and I'm expecting that she would share this information with the agency. Is that right?
She would you mean the results of the study?
Yes, yes.
Uh-huh,
So
that
it
is
would
her plan.
benefit our evaluation of letters training.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Please, Vice Chair Bollinger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask kind of the same question. I know that we have invested so much money into this letters training for students. So I think it would be great to find out how is that impacting our actual student outcomes. So I'm actually excited to see how that turns out if we were to pass this. So thank you.
I'm gonna just make another attempt. Liz Bernfeld, are you online? Can you hear us and can you respond? Feels like interstellar, but let me.
Yes, I am here.
Perfect. Well, would you like to comment or share anything about your proposal with the committee?
Sure. So during my internship with USBE, I actually sat down with Sarah Young, who was the chief of staff at the time, and I said, you know, what would the board be interested in learning about that maybe because of finite resources that they haven't been able to get information about? And so this was her suggestion. And so I am, due to the scope of how much has been invested in this, I am really interested to see.
Okay, she left us on a
What
cliffhanger.
good information we can get to help inform, you know.
Okay.
Misery.
Okay, thank you. And then we're ready for a motion.
I'll make that motion. It'd be really nice if, I move that the committee approve the data sharing agreement with Liz Bernfeld and forward to the board for approval.
So the motion before this committee is that the committee approve the data sharing agreement with Liz Bernfeld, USBE 250070RA, and forward to the board for approval. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Director Chalice. Okay, the next item before the committee is R277609. And there's, this is listed twice. One for the incorporated document is 1.5, and then the actual rule, which is 1.6. And it says Dr. Voorhees would be queuing that up for us. She might be.
She told me she had to be in student.
Okay. So is that Director Rasmussen or Deputy Superintendent Nui? Oh, I see right there, number 2.
Thank you so much, Chair. So before you today, we have R277609 on the agenda, and as part of that rule, there's an incorporated document. This is the least restrictive behavioral interventions technical assistance manual, and staff has been working on this for several months, and we have staff here to present the changes that are before you. They may have run out to get support. But you'll see, I'll just tell you what's in backup. So kind of explain a little bit of that. But we've got 3 different drafts. We have the draft that staff brought to you last month, and that was put together by the working group. Then we had a board member propose draft 2. And then within the last week, there has been uploaded a draft 3, which is an attempt to kind of compromise the 2 or create a compromise of the 2. So I'll pass that on to our lovely staff members.
Just for purposes of clarification, the draft that the committee will be working on, is that the LRBI draft 3 final redlined? Is that the committee's understanding?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Hey, Chrisanne Lewis, I'm the Student Services Coordinator. We have spent about the past 2 weeks or so looking at some public feedback from the contributors of the original LRBI, the 2023 version of the LRBI. We've been talking with board members We've been going through the two drafts, draft 1 and draft 2, and we've been trying to come up with a version that, you know, meets as many of the requests as possible, while still staying with, you know, evidence-based practice and providing a document that is comprehensive and helpful to the field out there. And I think that we've done that. There's been a lot of work that's gone into this draft 3. Primary changes, we have attempted to consolidate some of the information so that it's a little bit more accessible to people in the field so that they're not reading through extraneous information. We have kept in a lot of the base information that would be helpful for new staff to the field, new teachers, new related service providers, and so on, while still providing some of the more complex information that people who have been in the field for a while would need in order to write a BIP or, you know, work with some students with complex needs. So I feel like this draft 3 is a good compromise of the two, and we would just ask you all to consider that and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Dr. Voorhees, I see that you're here. Is there anything that you would like to add or contribute to this before we open up to questions from the committee?
Thank you, Chair. Leah Voorhees, Deputy Superintendent. I would like to contribute that an enormous amount of work has gone into this by board members, by community members, by staff, and I really appreciate all of the time and effort that people have taken to listen to each other's concerns and try to reach agreement and understanding. And I agree exactly with what Coordinator Lewis just said about draft 3 being a nice, not compromise, but a nice consensus on a way forward.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking, Chair.
And then Director Coda.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Director Coda, Director of School Safety and Student Services. I would just echo what Coordinator Lewis and Dr. Voorhees mentioned. There was a lot of work, and we did look at this from multiple angles, including community members, those in the field, teachers, and then also from the lenses of student services and school safety as well, to make sure that we are meeting all of those needs in the best way possible.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee? I know that several committee members have spent a lot of time working on this matter, so don't feel compelled to ask questions, but if you have questions or comments, feel free to ask. Oh, Vice Chair Bollinger,
Thank you. I'd like to make a comment and then ask a question, if that's okay, Chair.
please.
I wanted to thank all of staff for the countless hours. I don't even know if we can add up how many hours has been spent on this. And also to just for the clarity of making sure that we're grounded in what the purpose of this document is, and really to make sure that we're serving our students the best that we can, and making sure that we're providing guidance and support to teachers to know how to do that with a focus on school safety. So thank you so much. I mean, really amazing that you have spent so many hours. I appreciate the willingness to make sure that there were a few parts that were unintentionally left off of draft 2, including the family engagement portion and some of the documents at the very end that are very useful to teachers as they're tracking behaviors. So there were some things there that we were able to look at and change. One question I had on draft 3, I'm looking at the very, very beginning piece, and I know this is a minor thing compared to everything else that's gone in, but there were some discussions about the contributor page and how that would be listed. So currently it has everybody all together in one. Is that the plan to keep it that way, or is the plan to adjust it to break down into the parts they were contributing?
So we had talked about this in our meeting, and there were several of the contributors that that requested to see the final product before deciding if their name was to remain on it. So what we would like to do with the board's permission is if this version is approved, we will reach out to those content contributors, make sure that they are still approving of their name being attached to it. And then we had talked about splitting by, reviewers, authors, contributors, and having those specified. And I am okay with that if that's the direction that the board would like to go.
I think that's fine on one condition. Can you scroll up to the page right before this one? Do you see how one name in particular is not aligned with the rest? If as part of your review, if you would just make that, then I think that would be fine.
One of these things is not like the other.
Yes. So not hearing any objection from the committee on either of those requests, I think
Wanted to bold
you'll be
it
fine to
in
do that.
Capital letters.
Any other questions from the committee? Board Member Lear, I see your light is on.
Oh, I didn't mean it to be on. No, I'm just
Okay,
overwhelmed by this. This was a huge, so yes, I guess I will speak. I primarily just second what Board Member Bollinger has said, that it was just a huge effort on your part. And I just appreciate your patience because we all had different ideas and I think we worked through them fairly well. And my fear is we are probably going to still have some amendments, but I think this is a better place to start than the earlier draft. And Amanda has just immense experience, and she's right in the middle of it right now. So she's a really good person to be working on this and weighing in on it. So I am willing to, are we ready for a motion?
yes.
I move that the committee approve R277609 incorporated by reference document, least restricted behavioral interventions, LRBI, technical assistance manual, draft 3 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
So the motion before the committee is that the committee approve R277-609 incorporated by reference document, least restricted behavioral interventions, LRBI, technical assistant manual, draft 3 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Not seeing any, that motion passes unanimously. Again, thank you to everyone who worked so hard on this to make this happen. Thank you. So the next item is 1.6, a companion matter. This is the underlying rule, R277-609, for LEA discipline plans and emergency safety interventions rule amendment. And would that be Deputy Newey?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the accompanying rule that incorporates this document that you all just voted on. And the only changes being proposed in this rule today are the lines that incorporate the document. So you'll see that in draft 1. I do believe that we have some motions just to make sure that we get the language right. But this change at the bottom, so section 7, is the only change that you'll see to this draft today. This was also recently updated, I believe, in December and January by this committee. And so you recently saw it as well and made some changes, and those are incorporated into this draft as well.
Yeah, I do have a motion that I'd like to make, and I believe, I don't know if Director Asma, you did have time to queue it up, and that's before the board. And this is that rather than saying we're going to incorporate by reference, I think the board needs to take an affirmative step in that we adopt this particular addition. And I'm not wed to the addition name. It's very unimaginative, but that's what I could come up with. So the motion before the committee is that the committee amend lines 200 and 201 to read (1), this rule incorporates by adoption the least restrictive, is that?
Chair,
Oh,
can I just interrupt before you make
Please.
the motion?
yes.
Incorporated by reference is a term of art that we use in rulemaking. Is there a reason that you're considering this motion to change the language? Because they have a whole section on using that specific term when we want to incorporate documents into rule.
And where's, no, I think that's good feedback. Thank you, Director.
That's there's a rulemaking manual that says this is how you make the rules, and they have a whole piece on this is how you incorporate a document. And they use the terms incorporate by reference.
Is that a document that USBE has put together, or is that the
That's
state guidance?
The Division of Administrative Rules.
Okay, that's
from the
fine.
state.
Then with that, I will withdraw the motion.
Sorry, I didn't have a chance to look at your motion. I just passed it along
Yep.
to Elise.
Okay. Well, now I know what happens to my motions when I send them to Director Rasmussen. So thank you for that. That's very nice. But just real before I turn the time over to Vice Chair Hart, could you just send me the link to that rulemaking? Thank you, Director.
Can it raises a question for me. So when we incorporate by whatever we say, reference, does it in our rules, does it mean this particular version, or does it allow for changes after we've incorporated it?
Usually we will specify in the rule we're incorporating by reference version 1 or the 1999 edition, or we specify whatever edition is being
Okay,
approved. So if there are changes, they are not approved by the board unless it comes back to the.
So our version of administrative, like our version of that term means the specific edition? Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Director, in light of that, then maybe we should reference the edition that we are incorporating by reference.
I think usually we do. Just, can I make one more comment about
Please,
that?
Board Member.
I don't think this is uncommon. This is, yeah, you knew that. We've got, if our rules had to include the whole driver's ed manual and the whole child nutrition manual, it would be unwieldy. So this is the process that administrative rules uses.
Okay, full disclosure, when I read a rule as a principal or as an administrator, I don't always know when I go to whatever reference manual, if it's the newest version. So I'm just trying to eliminate that problem that I have an old version of something sitting on my shelf and I don't ever know how to connect what's in the rule to which book
It's not a perfect,
no,
agree.
it just needs a date. It needs something that connects one to the other.
I think that is really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I believe Director Rasmussen.
The one thing that you would want to do is to just specify May 2025 edition in the rule so that you're not, somebody doesn't look at an old edition or a potential future edition and say that's what the board has adopted. So we can do a draft for that, a motion for that.
Perfect. Then the motion before the committee.
Oh, did you already do it, Elise?
Yep.
Does that work?
I think that it's fine for me. I'll ask the committee to review the language. If there's any questions, comments, concerns,
No,
The other, sorry.
please.
When we did the rule, it said the least restricted behavioral. And so I'm not sure if it matters or if one is more accurate than the other.
You're my phone is apparently dead. We've.
They're all dead? It was a long day yesterday.
The one that took listed out here, at least just listed out here, and it should be so.
So the language here is the correct, okay.
Sorry, just to repeat that on mic. So the correct name is the least restrictive behavioral intervention manual. So what's on up here under the motion is correct.
Then let's do this. So if this motion is acceptable to the body, let's vote on this and then we can address the change to the technical. Okay. So with that, the motion before the body is that the committee amend line 198 to read, this rule incorporates by reference the least restrictive behavioral intervention manual, May 2025 edition. Before We're in the middle of a vote. If no one objects, I'd just like to ask a question, which is, does the manual that we have actually reference May 2025 edition anywhere? It does?
On the title page.
Okay, thank you. In big letters and bold okay. Is that? So with that, and apologies, the committee amend line 1A to read, this rule incorporates by reference the least restrictive behavioral intervention manual, May 2025 edition. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And then again, no objection. If there's no objection from the committee, we'll ask you to make that technical change to the motion we passed in terms of the name. Okay, thank you.
Chair, we still need to vote on the underlying motion, which is to pass the rule.
Okay. And then we're ready for a motion.
I'm happy to make that.
Thank you,
motion.
Vice Chair Bollinger.
I'd like to make a motion that the committee approve R277609 standards for LEA discipline plans and emergency safety interventions rule draft 1 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the committee is that the committee approve R277-609 standards for LEA discipline plans and emergency safety interventions rule draft 1 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor? Any opposed? Dr. Hart? Okay. So that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the next item before the committee is item 1.7, that is R277-100, definitions for Utah State Board of Education rules, amendment and continuation. And Director Rasmussen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is our universal definitions rule, definitions that we put in R277-100 apply to all rules that the board adopts unless otherwise specified. So there's just a few changes that we're recommending here, and then I think there may be a motion or two on the rule. First change you'll see on line 11 just is giving it the oversight category in that this does not provide specific responsibilities on LEAs. This would be categorized as exempt. As far as definitions, the recommendation is that we update first the definition of cumulative file. You'll see on line 44 and 45 that staff have recommended that in addition to the cumulative file, including record of student immunizations, that if there is an exemption, that the record should also include medical or personal exemptions. So you'll see that on 44 and 45. Additionally, because of the passage of language in recent legislative sessions about the success sequence, there is a recommendation that we add a definition in this rule for the success sequence. And so you'll find that on lines 188 through 193. And then the last change that is being recommended is just something that I noticed from a UPAC perspective, looking on line 196. There's a definition for suspension, but it's for student suspension. And so I just added language clarifying that this doesn't apply, that definition doesn't apply in the UPAC rule context. Happy to answer any questions you have on that rule.
Board Member Lear.
I just had a question on the first definition line. Remind me the lines of
44 and 45.
Right. And it's helped me understand why you use the or 44 and 45. Yes. Why you used or. It seems like it should be and.
I think that the record would have student immunizations or a medical or personal exemption. I don't know that you definitely necessarily have both, but you'd have either. It would be either or.
Record of required student immunizations.
Or the exemption.
But you could have both. You could have both.
I mean, that we could change that. I'm not
I'm
glued to that.
I was wondering if it was intentional or it just feels like
I don't think a lot of thought went into
there
that.
could be some immunization information and some exemption information.
But I can
And I
understand
know you
that.
can't do and or you're not supposed to.
I think you could change that to and without. any problem.
I feel more, it feels more accurate to me, but I don't want to get hung up on it. So yes, do you want an amendment or do you want me to make an amendment or are you okay about him doing that non-substantively?
I'm okay. I just want to make sure the committee doesn't have any
That's the only question I had. Then I will add, just because I've got the mic for a minute, I really think this was way too long in coming. This is such a good idea that that the staff started probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. Before that, every rule would redefine, and we had lots of competing definitions. I just hope we try really hard to use these definitions over and over again and not make them up in different rules so that we're inconsistent. So I'm done. Thanks.
Okay. And that was done by unanimous consent, is my
That was
understanding?
what I understood it
Okay,
to be.
thank you. I do have, I think, 3 motions on this rule. I don't know if they're all queued up. I would ask Director Rasmussen, but apparently he just sends them to
I did
Deputy
those-
Superintendent
I did those
Newey, so
motions,
I
Chair,
will.
thank you.
Okay, just checking. So, first motion is that the board add, beginning on line 14, paren 1, accountability practice means any evidence-based practices that increases academic outcomes, decreases behavior that disrupts the learning environment, and holds students accountable for their actions by requiring them to take responsibility to repair harm and provide restitution when appropriate. And I'm inserting that because it's in Rule 609. That language is also reflected in the LRBI. And because of that, I would like that incorporated into the definitions document. Any comments, questions, or discussion on that motion?
Or we could just say any evidence-based. Okay, so
That's fine. Those that's fine.
we have to vote? Or
Yeah.
do you need a second?
No, in
No
committee, you
second.
don't need a second. So I just want to make sure everybody's had a chance to read it. Comments, questions? Vice Chair Bollinger.
Yeah, just a question for clarification, because we define a lot of words and a lot of rules. Is this rule meant to define, like basically be almost like a glossary of all of our definitions, or how do we pick and choose which ones go into this rule? Or
Wait a minute ago.
So if I may, basically this is intended for definitions that we expect to be used, I think, more than once. And that we think will have kind of universal applicability throughout the rules. And so, I mean, there's no hard and fast policy or rule that says this is what goes in that rule, but that's, I think, kind of the rule of thumb in the time that I've been here.
Please, Vice
just
Chair
a comment.
Bollinger.
There's no, it's been very obvious. I'm not a big fan of creating definitions where I don't think that they're used in practice or there's not a lot of research behind them. However, because we have used this and it has been added into some of our rules and into some of our documents, it's something that I can support, but just still do not like the practice of creating definitions. So I just need to get that off my chest.
Practice from 609, putting it in this rule.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair, but
Yeah,
I didn't want that. Okay, not seeing any other comments or questions. We're
I'm just a step behind today, sorry.
no.
I'm wondering, Member Carey, where did you develop this from? Is that okay to ask you? Do you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, well, I think it wasn't just me. It was based on a discussion with several board members, and as a way to better align our rules with legislation, feedback received from the field, and that is where the phrase and definition was produced from or by.
Is it
It's
in?
609 and
It's in 609. Is it in the code? Is it in?
It's in the LRBI in 609.
Right, it
at-
is in those, yes.
Yeah, at the present time.
Which we made up in there too. It was made up in there too.
Can I?
Please,
Okay.
Vice Chair. Oh,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
I'm asking you for your opinion, so I don't want to push you, but that was thank you for responding.
Yep, thank you, Board Member Lear. Vice Chair Hart.
I do think that if we're going to use, if rules pass with language that is not maybe in other places, then it actually means that we do need to put it in here because it needs to be clear what it is. Because now we're asking practitioners to use a term that they haven't seen in other places, which pragmatically, we need to give them a definition because if it's stated, then they got to know what it means. So, however it gets there, I think it's important that that whether it's now a Utah phrase or not, it needs a definition and people need to follow it. So pragmatically, I didn't want to get on the soapbox, but when educators use EduSpeak, there's a consequence to it. And I wish that we wouldn't I wish we would talk about about the behaviors rather than using lingo. And when we use lingo, that gets us into trouble. That's why I personally don't like the term social emotional learning, because it's used in so many ways, it means nothing. So I actually think education has a higher level of responsibility to create glossaries, because when people use terms and throw around things like restorative practices, like SEL, like those things, it means so many different things to so many different people that we're almost irresponsible when we use it in our rules rather than saying what we mean. So I think we need to get in the habit of saying what we mean rather than using terms that people throw around that may or may not mean. So I actually think it's a better practice to stop using certain terms and actually describe what we mean by those terms for clarity's sake. Because words come and go, phrases come and go in the court of public opinion, and people think they know what they're talking about, or people think, more importantly, when I use the term, I believe that the person I'm using the term with has the same definition. And that is more often than not true with some terms. So anyway, I just wish we would be more descriptive than not when talking about our rules. And it means that we do have a responsibility to have a glossary. So anyway, a soapbox, I get it. And that may make no sense whatsoever, but I needed to say it anyway.
Okay, not seeing any other lights. The motion before the committee is that the committee add, beginning on line 14, paren 1, accountability practice means any evidence-based practice that increases academic outcomes, decreases behavior that disrupts the learning environment, and holds students accountable for their actions by requiring them to take responsibility to repair harm and provide restitution when appropriate. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? It appears unanimous, but I don't want to. Okay. That Yeah, that motion passes unanimously.
Some deep research, I would be more persuaded. I'm saying that offline.
I appreciate that. Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Then, Ben, I have, I think, two more motions on Rule 100. Oh. Okay, this is on line 186. And this, let me state the motion. The motion before the committee is that the committee amend, beginning at line 186, to read, developing intervention plans that protect potential victims and address the threatening behavior, as well as any underlying circumstances contributing to the risk. And then I'll speak to that. So we're replacing what's currently on line 186 with the language of the motion. Oh, that's success sequence. No, 186, developing intervention plans. So very similar, but my concern with reading the original motion or the original language of the rule was that it seems to equate the stimulated threatening behavior with an underlying problem where those two things can be very distinct in nature. So both have to be addressed separately. And I believe the language in the motion addresses that better or more effectively than what was there.
So, Chair, I have a question.
Yes. Oh, wait.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Please, Vice Chair Hart.
So really what you're talking about is a root cause, like when we do an antecedent, or I think
it could be, but my bigger concern is that the phrase stimulated underlying behavior subtly implies that the threatening behavior was provoked or triggered by the victim.
I see.
And so now I'm looking at, well, are we really, the possibility of shifting the blame? It's subtly implied in the language that we have. That's what I'm really trying to address. And that's why I try to separate saying, look, we need to address the threatening behavior and then any underlying circumstances. But when we conflate those two, it seems to suggest that the victim may be responsible for the circumstances contributing to the risk. And that's what I'm trying to remove. Board Member Lear.
And I think this particular change in definition doesn't seem to make a difference, but the other side of the double-edged sword of using this kind of a process where we have a glossary, and this goes to Molly's point a little bit too, is that we have a rule that this definition arose from, and that rule was passed based on a certain definition. Now we're changing the definition without revisiting the rule. And in this case, I think it's a nuance of a difference, and I don't think it changes any practitioner's view of how they look at a threat assessment. But I think we need to be careful about changing these definitions in the abstract, as they're not attached to a rule at the time. Speaking to Molly's point of a common understanding of what these things mean.
And I appreciate Board Member Lear's thoughts on that. And I corresponded with Director Coda last night asking where, in what rules this language appeared. And if I could ask Director Coda to address, because I think that's certainly a concern that we don't want to change the what the rule where this language was used was intended to effectuate. So
that's pretty tedious on my part for this particular definition, but as a general practice, it could be a problem.
Understood. Director Coda?
Thank you so much, Director Coda, Director of School Safety and Student Services. One thing that I would want to bring to everyone's attention is the R277400. This is a trailer of what's to come. We have quite a few things that we're working on with Elise in some language changes. So if you wanted to, we could bring this definition and have some more discussion on what you want to do within that definition within R277400, along with all of those other proposed changes that came from or coming from House Bill 40. And so we were planning to bring that to you, I believe in August. Is that right, Elise? And so if you wanted to at that time, we could address this definition.
But currently changing this, does this change the rules where this language is currently used in such a way to alter the rule in a negative way or in a way that wasn't intended by the board? Yeah, please, Vice Chair.
That's exactly why I was thinking it through as an antecedent. I was thinking of doing an actual threat assessment. And if this change would change anything about that threat assessment, and it wouldn't, it actually is, it does, when you're doing threat assessments, you're considering those risks. So this, in this particular case, actually speaks to the threat assessment a little closer, I think, because of the risk, because that's what you're doing with the threat assessment. Now, point very well taken about out of context, but in this particular case, I think it actually would be even more in line with what a threat assessment does. But it also is in line with what we do in behavior intervention plans. We consider the antecedents, we consider the root causes, that kind of thing. So I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you. Just to add to that, it does appear that this language would just expand upon what threat assessment is meant to do and takes language from what most schools are using, which is the CSTAG model, and is inconsistent with that.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we're ready for a motion. Oh, wait,
You already made the motion.
then we're ready for a vote. Rod, I'm sorry, I was ready to toss that to you. Okay, so we're ready for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Not hearing any, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, and thank you, Director Coda. So, Ben, you didn't have one more motion from me? No, that's okay. Thank you. Okay, the next item before the board is oh, sorry, Ben. Thank you. So the motion, well, we're ready for a motion.
Yes, I make the motion, the committee continue.
Microphone, please.
Okay. Make the motion that committee continue and approve R277100 definitions of Utah State Board of Education rules, draft 1 is amended on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, item 1.8, this is R277-123, process for members of the public to report violations of statute and board rule. And Deputy Superintendent Nooy will cue us up.
Thank you so much, Chair. So R277-123 is the process for members of the public to report violations of statute and board rule to the agency. This rule was brought to the committee by a group of board members. So this is a board member suggested draft 1. There are changes to most of the sections. There's some additions for clarity, a few changes in definitions, and then some changes to the process by which hotline complaints are dealt with. If you don't mind, Chair, would you like to speak to the changes further?
No, that's a good summary. I mean, the changes are fairly extensive, but they've been outlined in the rule and we're ready for questions or comments. Thank you.
Me.
Sorry,
That's right.
Carol, I couldn't see the light.
And I'll defer to the chair on this, but I did spend some time on this and I would, if the chair would like to discuss some of the issues, I'm fine about that. But I would like to, but there's nothing urgent about this, like to take at least another month and work through these changes. I think this can be a much more streamlined process. I think we've got some well-intentioned changes, but that I think it would cause the maybe board members to interfere or put themselves in places where they don't belong in the hotline process as well as they interact with LEAs. And that makes me very uncomfortable. And so I would prefer that we keep working on this for a month and see if we can make this a little, add some changes that some board members have wanted, but not make it such a prescriptive and difficult process for LEAs to comply with. And if you want to have discussion in addition, that's great. So that's what I'm trying to say. That's my motion, but I'm not discussion's fine too. It's kind of garbled, but sorry about that.
No, I understand that. And I would be against the postponement. When I received your markup yesterday, I did reach out to Debbie Davis, and I wanted to make sure that internally that we were not overburdening or shifting focus or overtaxing. And when I walked away from that conversation, it was my takeaway that no, this wouldn't do that to their processes. And actually, this would be an improvement on our current system. And this wasn't created in a vacuum. I just want to say that this is a direct result of Representative Hall's bill, where what's now law, they directed us to create a framework for intake of complaints, not only on the board side, but also the UPAC side. This one we've limited to just the internal complaint mechanism, specifically the hotline. But rather than me talk about it, I'd ask Debbie Davis to.
Oh, maybe I should just be there.
Please.
Okay, so sorry, that feels so far away, but Debbie Davis, the Chief Audit Executive for the board. So yes, 123 is our hotline rule, and I think you're all very well aware that the hotline is hot. There's a lot of things going on there as far as concerns coming in, a lot of different kinds of concerns. And it's definitely been where we are now is a product of many lessons learned over a decade of time. And I think we do have a pretty good process. Our database is working pretty well. We continue to just try and improve and be really efficient through the process. The current policy is that there is quite a bit of local control that is still given to LEAs. And so the current policy is referring back to LEAs because they're the ones interacting with parents and students, and they're governing and managing and operating schools. So appropriately so, we refer back. That said, there's still quite a bit of work on our part to receive. And then with the changes in December, now LEs are required to provide an update or a summary. And we're just kind of seeing what that looks like, how that happens. So to the point, thanks for letting me ramble for just a second. But what do these new changes do as far as workload? What would that do? Well, there are changes. It would impact workload. We would need to adjust our database so that we can track
the data that's needed by the committee. I think some of it, there's an intent to, hey, let's have all concerns coming into the same place. And I think that was the intent of the establishment of the hotline in the first place in Utah code. So that is important. And I would say there are currently others at the State Board of Education. I would say concerns coming in a lot of places. We don't have one place. And so what the rule attempts to do with some of the superintendent responsibilities and things like that is to say, well, let's try and get comprehensive information. In doing that, we don't know exactly what's on the other side of that door. I don't know how many other concerns there are. So will it impact workload? Yes. The extent to which we don't know. There are changes right now. The current, hey, we're trying to respond to people or refer back to LEAs within 3 days. I think it says right now, or as soon as possible, but we're really sticking to the 3 days, and that's been expanded to, hey, 7 days. And so it's like, okay, if we're taking on a little bit more, it might take a little bit longer. But with that recognition, it's like, okay, that can be the next step. And again, everything with hotlines has been this decades-long process where we're learning and baby steps are being taken as we're learning things and improving. And so some of even the LEA policy changes or the changes to say, okay, LEAs are supposed to provide an update or a summary after 45 days. I was just looking at that data this morning. This is like first look, you're getting it because I first looked last night. We, out of 39 concerns where we directly referred to LEAs, we've had 13 responses. 26 LEAs have not responded. What do we do, right? And so some of the language here is to say, hey, this is what we do. And that's not currently in rule. But again, we're learning and we're still early on in the process. So there's a lot of space for policymaking. And now I've spoken probably too long, Chair, so I apologize, but that's a little bit of context from my perspective.
Yeah, so, and I thank you. What struck me about when this became law and we had to look at our processes, two things surprised me. And this one was, we don't have a central gathering place for all the complaints that flow into the Utah State Board of Education. Different departments, different areas of the organization receive their own complaints, and they're never pooled together. So we really don't have a global perspective on the state of education in Utah. And so one thing we wanted to do in this rule was, can we funnel this to one place? And it seemed that the proper place for that to be housed was audit. And we worked extensively with, I keep calling you Debbie, which is very informal. But your title, Chief Audit Executive. So CAE Davis, and said, if we did this, if we did funnel this to you, would that overwhelm your office? And she was very candid and said, I don't think so, but I don't know, because I don't know what's beyond door number 2. Well, what's beyond door number 2 is more concerning to me. If we're supposed to exercise general control and oversight, how do we do that if we don't know the nature and extent of what's happening? So that was one. And then the second one was, as we talked, it was the level of non-compliance that we have. And I believe it's because everybody's busy. I believe that everybody has a lot to do. But when this organization makes a request, I would expect that we get compliance with it. And that is not happening currently. So the second point of this rule is to address non-compliance. So one, we need a better global perspective of what's happening. And then 2, we need a means to make sure that when we ask for data, when we ask, how has this been resolved, they just don't ignore us. Because a lot of our requests are made on behalf of the legislature. They want data from us, they want information from us, and we've only been giving them a partial snapshot. That needs to be addressed, and that was really the driving force of this rule. But I'm going to defer back to Board Member Lear, because this is all in response to the motion that she made.
And I'll go through every single page and point out why I think these are problems if you want me to right now. And I hear what you're saying in the end about many of our requests are in response to the legislature, but these are not that. These are requests, these are complaints from Ellie, from the hotline that may be random, that may be employment issues, that may be special ed issues, that really are not the responsibility of the board. And I hear you about compliance, but then I heard you say that Director Davis said, well, we don't know exactly what the workload would be. And now she's saying it would be a significant increase in workload. So I think before we move in this direction, we need to know, and there's some speculation, but we need a better sense of, are we going to add 3 auditors to do this? Because that's what it will take. And then and I'm being a little less linear than I'd like, but when Director Davis says we have 13 responses back, and was that after 1 prompt? Is it after 2 prompts? Some would argue there shouldn't have to be any prompts at all, but I'm not sure that LEA, without knowing more, I'm not sure that we being the Utah State Board of Education, are the most important thing in an LEA's workload. Maybe responding to a random parent complaint about a coach is not the first thing on the list of a school district that has 3 administrators. So it doesn't give me enough information to know that there haven't been X number of responses. I just think we need to look at this more carefully. There are places, and I'll point you to them if you want me to. I've given you my very messy, but where board members knowing too soon about something is an inappropriate involvement. If this is going to be a UPAC case, then the board member should be waiting until the process plays out so that the final adjudicator isn't involved in the investigation. And that's what's happening here. That's why I'd like to spend a little more time on it. I hear what you're saying. And if wishes were fishes, we could have all of the compliance that we want, but that takes a lot of people. And I don't think there's the appetite for that in the legislature. So they're a little conflicted. So that's why I'd like to spend more time on it and say, maybe we start by biting off a couple of smaller pieces and build to it. But if you want, I'll go through every concern I have that I listed for you.
I just want to say, if I had a wish, it wouldn't be for fishes, but we have different, and I appreciate the sensitivity around it, and it is big, and you're right. We don't know what the legislative appetite will be, but we are providing data that is incomplete. I find it, having worked with CAE Davis and audit, I know that their patience really is limitless in many ways, and that these directives and requests, it's not that we're asking on Monday and demanding an answer by Wednesday. It has been months, sometimes extending over 12 months. And this isn't, at some point, it's no longer optional. And I think that is some of the, and look, we saw this on the School Safety Task Force. We had some LEAs say, we're just not going to give you the data. And I was stunned by that. And then they had to pass a law that gave the Chief Pennington the power to shut down an LEA. And all of a sudden, the data started flowing in. Like we should never have to come to that. And that's what this seeks to address, that we never get to that point. So Vice Chair Hart.
I think there is so much packed into 123. Everybody knows I wear 2 hats. I want to comply, very much so. I have 2 cases. I have 2 complaints before me. I'll tell my business. One is very easy. I can give a summary. I can forward a summary. It explains it. It resolves it. Blah blah blah. The other one is a file. It's probably 1.5 to 2 inches thick. Do I do I turn in all of it? Do I just scan it in and forward the whole investigation? I mean, my point being that, there's so many pieces to this. I read it and I understand it because I love and immerse myself in audit. But I now I can see the point where this requires almost a study session to map things out. Like I need a map, I need a flow chart, I need this has so many moving pieces to it that I think that even if it is the most perfect document, it's going to, in order for 15 members to feel comfortable with it, it's going to need some time to absorb it, because it does go in, it goes into the compliance that the legislature wants. It goes into practices that we already do. There's concerns about, where the board gets involved and when the board gets involved. I do see there's so many pieces to it that in order to get to, to steal the phrase, to get to right, whatever right is, it's going to need, in order to be absorbed by board members so that they're not resistant to it, even if it's perfect, it will require some more time. I can see that point. It could be the most perfect thing in the world, but it is so deep that it may need more than that. Or we're going to be faced with this being a 3-hour, 4-hour item in our board meeting if we don't do some preventative work on that. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but.
Joe, another point when you're ready for me.
Yep, go ahead.
The other thing I think we have to do, and this, as I was reading through this, it was a little reminiscent of, and you were lucky enough to miss this discussion with the board a few years ago. This was a little reminiscent of the school fees dilemmas and discussion. And and I'll make a further analogy that it's a little like catching speeders. There are not enough of us. If people, and in our case, LEAs for the most part, don't work with us in voluntary compliance, if they aren't, even if they're grudging, as we've experienced recently, even if they're grudging, if they don't work with us, there are way more of them than there are of us. And we literally can't force that kind of compliance. I think we have to work with them on a document like this to say what parts of this are reasonable, because I know they can't evade us. And I'm not trying to say that that LEAs are devious or they don't want to give the USBE information all the time. It's just a matter of resources and time and priorities. So that's why another reason with the speeding analogy in mind, I would rather work with LEAs and say, is this, and yes, Debbie is a master of steps and timelines and stuff like that. But we need to know from LEAs individually, collectively, is this too long? Is this, will you comply if we do this rather than prescribe this? So I think this is not something that we can force. It won't be successful, and it will alienate LEAs and not invite their compliance to satisfy, in some cases, legislative requirements.
No, and I understand. And I want to make clear that LEAs were consulted, right? We did reach out. We did speak. Now, they may not be the LEAs that you would have spoken to or the contacts that you may have, but educators were consulted, LEAs were consulted, members of the legislature were consulted. So I understand the wisdom of getting buy-in, but this wasn't a surprise. It's been on the agenda. I've spoken to Vice Chair Hart about this several times. But again, I have a vote. It's the will of the committee that decides. But before we take that vote, Vice Chair Bollinger has had her light on.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few clarifying questions for CAE Davis, if that's okay, just for my own. As I've looked through this and I've actually had a chance to speak to individuals from LEAs, and I do appreciate the work and the idea that's gone behind making sure we have a process that's clear to address concerns. It's fascinating to me as I've been new on this board, and you see all over social media or all, kind of like, nobody's doing anything about this. But my question is, well, how did you address it? Because putting on social media doesn't make it being addressed by USBE, right? Or by an LEA. And so I do appreciate the intent of having a clear pathway of complaints. With this situation as well, I spoke with a member of an LEA that had a concern that there was a complaint that came into USBE, not through the hotline, but through a different department, that ended up getting sent to an administrative assistant to address. And so my question on this is, and I think that Chair Carrie kind of addressed this a little bit, but I just wanted to clarify. With this process, does this then have all of our departments within USBE funnel the complaints through audit so it goes through the same process, so the correct individuals at a district, meaning the superintendent or of the leadership, LEA leadership, does that address this concern clearly? And if so, can you help me know where that is?
Chair, are you good if I take that? Okay. Yes, so I think we're looking at, it's in the new section, superintendent responsibilities, which is 123-7, which indicates, it says alleged violations or, I'm sorry, line 267 is kind of where that starts. Yeah, I'm like, I can't tell half the stuff, but yeah. So line 267, where it indicates alleged violations reported to the superintendent, which is a defined term, and I would assume incorporates all individuals under the superintendent. It says shall be reported to the public education hotline within 7 business days for tracking and reporting purposes. So what does that mean? And to your point, does that need to be more clear? So they would send it to us and then we'd get it in our database for tracking. And then I think the question is, right, for tracking and reporting, if we're reporting, that would usually, I would think then, okay, then we're going to move through our process. Now, currently we sort of have that relationship with student support because many of the concerns that we have are with that section of the State Board of Education. And it really depends, like, is it you just you just got the concern and you send it to us and then we can start the process, and then it would be like normal, like, hey, we've just referred this to you and you can go. If there is interaction and an attempt to start solving the concern before it comes to the public education hotline and we're looped in a little bit later, sometimes that gets tricky because relationships and communications are already happening. And so it's, okay, do we now involve ourselves, and how many people are, now involved with, hey, let's try and get this resolved. So timing does really matter in this because there are so many parties that are involved. So there would, whatever the interpretation of this or internal policy that's developed because of what this says would hopefully clarify that, okay, will be the streamlined process. But I think the attempt with the language here is that that's how it would be going forward.
If I may, may I follow up with another
Please.
question? Okay, thank you. So, okay, thank you for that explanation, because I do think that that's important to make sure that we get the correct line of communication so it can be addressed by the proper people. That's really important. I do appreciate that we'll have a better understanding of all of the complaints coming in, because we can't address problems unless we know the frequency and intensity of them. Member Lear kind of brought this up, and maybe this is more of discussion to the board, as I do appreciate the intent of looping board members into what's happening in their areas, right? Again, we can't address things if we don't see patterns or know what's happening in the areas and those constituents that we're representing. I am a little bit concerned of the potential for board members to get involved in crossing their lane of responsibility that might interfere with an investigation or in the process. So maybe CA Davis, maybe you can speak to that. Do you feel like it's clear enough for board members to know what their lane is, or to give guidance on what they're supposed to do as they're within this current draft?
Okay, within the current draft, yes. So there were some changes related to this, as have been stated, and it really is a policy decision of the board, what level of involvement, at what point involvement, that kind of a thing. So in the section on internal audit responsibilities, and I'm starting to look at line 141, where it talks about, okay, when we have sufficient information, when a hotline complaint is received, that's the point where we're doing a high level screening and we start considering the referrals to be made. And you can see there, it says the complainant, and that would be, sometimes we're just, responding, sending information back to the complainant. We of course want to get information to the LEA, and then that's where we have now the changed language, the board member of the district wherein the LEA is located. Right, so that kind of pulls in, okay, at that moment, the board member would know, and that would be a specific, finding out about a specific concern. And so that's a question. Do board members need, hey, information about a specific concern in the complainant, just in case, a board member wants to interact? Or, and now I can't remember exactly which line it's on, just, hey, a monthly report that's more of aggregated information, that just gives you a summary of what's happening. Or, as is currently being done, we provide just, here's concerns by category. It's not by board member, it's not by LEA, but we're just giving you like, hey, here's the categories that we're tracking, here's the number of concerns. So definitely a policy decision. I think the current version is, there was the desire for board members to, hey, we, want some of that more specific information. Is it appropriate? I will leave that to you. If that's what you want, that's kind of what's included. If that is not what you want, then the language could be amended.
Chair, if you don't mind. And I think the intention of that was so that we would just be informed as board members, right? Not to get in the business, not to try to, usurp the authority of an LEA, but to just be aware of what's happening in your district. And so I work very closely with our LEAs. And I only get involved when they ask me to get involved. And so I feel like it's important, though, especially when you're dealing with your constituents, to know what's happening in your district. What we don't want to be is blindsided when maybe somebody's made complaints to the local, the local LEA, and it's, escalated, it's finally come to the board through the hotline, and then we don't know about it because it's never been communicated to us. So that's why these changes were put in place so that at the discretion of the board member, if they'd like that information, they could have that information. And this doesn't put any burden on any board member to have that information, or to ask for that information, or to do anything with that information. But if you want access to that information, it's available for you to have. So as a board member, I personally would like to have that information about the things that are going on in my district. I just want to be aware. Maybe I want to pray about it. You know what I mean? All those types of things. I'd like to be aware of what's happening in my district. So that's why we put those things in there.
Board Member Lear.
And again, we're kind of jumping all over the place, which is, I guess, process of discussion today. So I'll do it that way. But I think that the point that Debbie made earlier to the superintendent responsibilities around line 270 is a really good illustration about wanting to refine that section. Because I'm looking at it now and it says, the superintendent shall provide a summary to the public education hotline. So I'm reading that literally, alleged violations reported to the superintendent, and then line 267, and then superintendent shall provide. Well, I know from talking to Superintendent Dixon over the last 10 years, she probably daily gets concerns from both superintendents and from constituents of superintendents. And because she's developed a working relationship with them and she has great experience and insight, she gives them lots of guidance informally. And I think that is a huge benefit to our whole system. And this suggests that if someone, either the complainant or the respondent, say superintendent, but it could be a member of staff, then goes to Sid with that information, that Sid is somehow supposed to come to Debbie, tell it to her, create a running list, and that is going to discourage superintendents and those who Sid could advise to come to her. Because the idea is that she can advise them and things can move more smoothly. So that's just one example of that section. And I know it's just an illustration, not necessarily the singular central point, but that's why I think we need to look at that more carefully. I personally don't want that in there. I don't want Sid to summarize every phone call she's received or whoever is the next Sid. That's how she helps the system run smoothly. And to just make it all a matter of public record is going to discourage cooperation and improvement.
So I keep seeing the board, the board logo since 1896. Is that right? Or 18, so we've had since 1896 to get this right. And we don't quite have it right.
So it's not like it's been.
And it never will be, right? I mean, it's education and it's dynamic. It's not static. And, you know, again, everything in here is the weighing of the pros and the cons, right? Do you want this informal method where there's less accountability, where the legislature and the public doesn't have full visibility on what's happening? Or do you want more of that visibility in the system? And I was stunned when I found out that audit does not have a true global perspective on the complaints flowing into this body. Because how do we update the legislature? How do we work with our districts, our LEAs, if we don't know the full extent and nature of what's happening in the field? So the concern, I just want to make sure that no one thinks that the concern wasn't deliberated on and addressed. It was. And I think that right now we're at this stage where the notion of voluntary compliance, where individuals or school districts believe that, well, when we get around to it, we get around to it. That's not the message I'm hearing from parents. It's not the message I'm hearing from the state auditor's office. You know, we just had a meeting with them and they weren't pleased at all that, because it's not just the LEAs are ignoring us, they're ignoring the state auditor's office and they're none too pleased at that. So I don't look at this as a form of punishment, but rather let's get to a place where this works for everybody. And that's what this was an attempt to do, which is we have to head this off at the pass. Otherwise, I think we'll continue to see difficulties and declining enrollment because we can never really address the big problems because we just don't know what they are. So that's what this is. I don't want anybody to think this is a form of punishment on, you know, the LEA or the school district. It's not. But yeah, accountability can be a tough thing.
That's my point.
But when
Oh,
you're
sorry.
getting billions of dollars in state aid, that there's a certain responsibility with that. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Vice Chair Hart and then Board Member Leader.
Yeah.
First of all, superintendent responsibilities, alleged violations. I don't think that everything that an LEA calls with to the superintendent rises to the level of a violation. The superintendent can, it doesn't mean that the superintendent would have to run and tell, you know, or report to Debbie, every conversation that they have. I think that, but when there is a violation, I do think that the superintendent would want to follow the process and want to make sure that everything is handled appropriately. So I don't think that this here says that every single conversation that a local superintendent has would result in a report to the hotline. So I very much think that it would not have a chilling effect. The other thing is, this absolutely 123 has to be fixed, and these things have to be done. We know that from almost every one of our stakeholders. LEAs aren't getting the message. They're not clear on what to do. We're not clear on what they should do. We don't have the documentation. And I've had to sit in front of a legislator or a legislative committee and say, we don't have this information. So this has to happen. The only concern I have is that in presenting the changes that need to happen, we need to change the rule, but then be clear about how we change the rule. So all I'm asking is that when this goes to the full board, that it goes with explanation or illustration, because it is a lot to swallow. But I do think that it absolutely does have to happen. And I think this is a well thought out process, considering all of the different pieces that we have to do. So I am in support of the rule. I just think we need to not confuse our own body about the kinds of changes in here. Like we just need more scaffolding in presenting this, or else it's going to feel so big that we're not going to make any progress. That's my concern. My concern is getting the rule changes to a point where people can understand why we're changing the rule and why we're making the changes that we are. That's to be clear.
And to be clear, I'm not saying we don't need better compliance. I'm not defending non-compliance at all. I am saying that I think, Chair Carey, you're kind of presenting this as a bilateral choice. We've got, no compliance, right? And I'm exaggerating for effect. So, but
Well, it's very effective because I didn't say that.
we have no compliance right now. There are all these LEAs running amok, and in fact, we need data to know how to do this better. I think that this document there's a better medium in this document, and even to Molly's point about alleged violations. So the superintendent's evaluating in her head every phone call she gets. Is it a violation? Is it not a violation? Is this a consultation? Is it not a consultation? And I don't want compliance to be such a threatening situation that there isn't informal give and take, and that we take the important time of our administrators with worrying about, are they going to catch me because I didn't? Is this a gotcha attempt, or is it really an attempt to have greater compliance at an appropriate level? So that's what I'm making the plea for, is let's look at this in a continuing way, and you may have consulted LEAs. I don't know who those are. I'd love to consult some LEAs. I'd love to. It sounds like Amanda has consulted some people she knows. I had one phone call from a superintendent yesterday morning that expressed some concern about this. So I'd like to consult some more of them. And I'd like to be able to quantify. Maybe we've talked to 15 rural school districts and 35 charter schools. And this is a middle ground that we can go with. And then I need to know. I mean, I think, and we're putting pressure on Debbie, or I am, and I need to know, is this realistically, this doesn't sound to me like every year we've gone to the legislature asking for more auditors, and that is before this. So realistically, and how many have we gotten, Debbie? you
From the
know,
legislature? No.
exactly. So,
From the board,
From,
yes.
but that's a chicken egg. We will never get more from the legislature if we don't have the data to show that we need it.
right, but it is, but on the other hand, we've got to have some manpower, some resources to gather. So I think that I'm looking for a middle ground, greater compliance, absolutely. But again, as we experienced with school fees, which was a 5-year experience, that didn't happen because there was a sledgehammer. It happened because we gradually said, we can help you with this. We'll get some more personnel, not as much as we'd like, but I feel like it's a more gradual process that would be more effective.
Thank you, Board Member Lear. Superintendent Dixon.
Thank you. I thank you for letting me chime in. I try not to do that, so I appreciate your indulgence. So if you'll scroll to the portion about the line, I think it's 120. Let's see, where are we? The superintendent's right there. Okay. Just, I think I want to give my perspective in the middle space of what I hear on both sides. So I do get calls from charter directors and from superintendents, and frequent calls, to Member Lear's point. A lot of those calls are talking through scenarios. I had a teacher who did X, or I have a principal who did X. I'm looking at this rule. And it's that kind of consultation that I don't see as having to report. What I see when I read this, so I want to make sure that I'm clear for not only the next 2 months of my tenure, but transitioning to the next person and to you all, quite frankly, and to Debbie. I read this as an LEA violation. So I'm thinking of the things that I've reported through the process to internal audit, to the hotline. And it's been more along the line of, we see this financial mismanagement, or this program has been mismanaged, and conversations have already taken place. And if we believe in local control, like we say we do, we like local control until we don't like their decisions sometimes. But we try to support our LEAs in doing their best work and in being compliant. So I get calls and we have conversations about, what does compliance look like? What I would report to Debbie, and have done so, to the hotline, are those where we need further investigation, because an LEA is either, maybe not knowingly, but we've had the conversations, and it's a systemic problem, either a board or the superintendent or the director did something that is not in compliance. And maybe conversations have taken place or not, but I would never report a consultation to Auditor Davis if somebody's calling to say, I'm trying to understand what this rule means, or I think I have a principal that may have violated this, or those are the kinds of things, to Member Lear's point, that would have a chilling effect. So I'm thinking, I'm checking in with you committee members and chair, because I'm thinking of compliance different than a consultation. Compliance is, here's a rule, I have violated it. Either I haven't checked in with anybody, or I haven't, I'm doing it anyway, versus here's a rule and I have somebody in my system who is not compliant, and I'm trying to get clear about the authority or what next steps I can take. I see those as two different things. So maybe have that part of the discussion for clarification, because part of what you're both saying is right. And I just want to make sure the words reflect the way that we've been operating. And if you think that the way we've been operating is not conducive, let us know. I've tried to inform board members when something's happening in their district. I think, Member Hall, what you said is so valuable. You can't help if you don't know. So some of it's just communication outside of rule, but do these words convey how I describe the way I think about it? That's what I'm asking you all. Thank you.
Thank you. There is a motion before the body. So let's go back to that. This is Member Lear. That the committee postpone discussion of the rule to the June committee meeting. I'm going to ask Board Member Hall, this is your, Rule 123 is the rule that you pulled. So what are your thoughts on the, do you want, well, let me ask this, do you want to speak to the motion?
I do. What I would hope that we would be able to do is pass this out of committee and commit as a committee to come together and work on this and pull together a second draft to bring before the full board in our next meeting. And I think we can do it. I think we could, there's enough things that were thrown out today, and I think that we can all do some homework and we can put our minds together, you know, and come up with another draft that we can bring before the board for the full board meeting on the next one. Molly.
I don't know that it needs another draft as much as it just needs some additional materials in order for people to understand what the changes are that are being asked. That's my, I don't think I'm articulating what I mean very well, but I can see how someone would take a look at this rule, this proposed rule, and say, oh, and just freeze because it's got so much in there, and it does adjust the philosophy or it does have some big leaps in it. And in order, and some leaps that are needed and necessary to almost modernize, almost bring the way we approach compliance to a more responsive level. But just like when you're teaching something that's hard or big, you've got to do it in ways, in pieces that learners or your audience can absorb. You can't go from 0 to 60. So all I'm asking is that when we present this, and I know audit can do it, I'm very well aware of the ability to provide some materials that show where it is and where it goes, so that our board members truly understand why the changes are needed. I support this going forward. I don't think we need more time as much as we need more explanation.
If it's okay, Chair. Oh, she does. Okay.
Board Member Lear.
I would oppose the motion. I don't oppose the concept, the motion that Member Hall made. Or I don't know if it was that a
Just a, you know.
a suggestion, not a
Yes.
formal motion.
Right,
Thank you.
right.
I don't want to bring this to the board till the committee has one more chance, because I took a very heavy-handed approach. I think we are wasting the board's time until we have a better product to take to the board. So I want one more committee meeting, and then I would be specific about amendments, about questions. Is this interfering with the employment practices of LEAs? Is this an inappropriate place for a board member to be inserted in terms of a UPAC concern? And I didn't do that. I just read this, and Molly sort of expressed my dismay that no, this is too much too soon and even some of the terminology. We don't say purported, we usually say alleged, and we should use language that is consistent with what we usually use, I think. So I don't object to greater compliance. I just think we need another board committee. I feel, and blindsided is not fair because nobody's done that. I just feel like it's so much that we need more discussion in a committee, and then I will bring amendments. Specific amendments to be able to maybe, I think, make this more functional. So, and so I'd like to do that in June and then bring it back to the board in August so we can have a more streamlined board discussion in August.
If it's okay, Chair, I do want to make it known that we did work together with CAAE Davis, and I asked her 2 days ago. I got her on the phone. I said, I want you to be transparent with me. I want you to be real and tell me if this is going to push you over the edge. And we both came to the realization that, look, we don't know what's on the other side of this door, right? As we come into compliance with the law and we start to deal with complaints differently, and all those complaints are flowing in through audit, yeah, it may open the door. We don't know what's on the other side of it, but I would hope that as an organization that we would get behind audit, and if there was funds available for an FTE, that we might provide another one if it was necessary. If it, out of 3, whatever it might be. But I do think this is very, very, very important. I do. So, and I understand where you're coming from too as well, but I think it's very important. I think that coming to compliance with the law sooner than later is of great importance too. It just shows that we respect what was put into play, and we're ready to get in line and move forward and do what's right here. So, yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
I can't see. Is your light on?
I'm done.
Okay.
I-
Yes.
I understand, and I do know that a lot of work needs to be done. But here's my problem with postponing. Postponing means we don't have a July meeting. So when we postpone discussion to the June committee, that means that this waits until August at least to go to full board. I have full confidence that this board knows how to work together in between meetings to get problems resolved. I don't feel like it needs to be postponed as much as I feel like we need to dialogue. And our board knows how to dialogue in order to get to the right place. Moving it to June drags this out unnecessarily. And we need to be able to report to interim that we are doing things in this space. So I know that it runs the risk of a lot of amendments in the June meeting. But at that point, if more work even needs to be done, then we could make the motion then to send it back to committee. But if we make the motion here, we're limiting ourselves, we're forcing ourselves into a much longer timeline that I don't think sends the right message. I think that it would be better to forward it. I'm speaking against the motion because I think it'd be better to forward to the June board meeting, knowing that we're going to be working on this in our own capacity as individual board members. And then when it gets to June, if enough work hasn't been done, we still have the option of throwing it back to committee so that we don't have another 4-hour conversation about one item. I have confidence that the board can do some work in between now and June for it to be ready for at least consideration in the June meeting. I don't want to cut that option off.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Vice Chair Bollinger.
Thank you, Chair. So Vice Chair, are you suggesting that when you say that we can do some work on it, are you suggesting that we would move that forward, but then work on and possibly bring then a draft 2 to the board in June? So instead of doing line by line today, find some time to continue to work on it as Member Lear has requested, but then taking it to the board. Is that a clear?
Yeah, but in addition, yes, to answer your question. In addition, some conversation on it right now is extremely beneficial so that the public and different people understand where some of the pain points are, so that some of that conversation is happening now and we get some of that out. Then we all take that information. We've all benefited from the conversation. We take that information back and work in our individual capacities, have our individual meetings with staff and our LEAs and our contacts and people that are vested in the process. And then in our June meeting, we have the ability to either move something forward so our LEAs have something to work on over the summer and before the start of the year. I just think this limits us and it gives our LEAs nothing to go on when August starts, and it gives our board not enough room to move, not enough runway to move in order for interim. So yes, the answer is yes, Member Bollinger.
So Vice Chair, Hart, are you making a motion?
I was speaking against the motion, but I would be willing to make a substitute motion.
Well, Board Member Leader put her light on first, so I want to recognize.
I can see where the votes lie, so there's no point in continuing this argument. I don't. And I think that I think we're not being realistic about what we have going on. We're choosing a new superintendent. We're going to have extra meetings for that. I feel like this is important enough to bring trust along with LEAs, a few that each of us has talked to, that it merits, because I fear a board meeting in June will absolutely be delayed, and then it will be even a longer delay than if we spent more time on it between now and June to have a better draft that we could then act on something in August. And I think you can still, I don't think it's an either or proposition either, Molly. You can still take that to interim and say that the committee is working on it and we've had a draft and we're working on a further draft. And I'll live with whatever the vote is, of course. I just think realistically, I've lived through that school fees discussion. You've forgotten. Some of you have forgotten. It takes years and meetings, and this is the same kind of issue because we had the exact same compliance issue. You're not doing what the law requires. And it seems so simple. So just do it. No, but that kind of malaise takes a while to cure. So I would prefer to delay. Molly can make her motion. I can vote my own conscience, and then we move on.
Thank you. Vice Chair Hart, do you have a motion to make on this, or?
Yeah, I'd like to make a substitute motion that the committee move. I think it's just back to the original motion. I'm just not sure that. Oh, didn't we put a motion? Okay. I see. Okay. I would like, but then it is a substitute motion. I'm substituting. I move that the committee, I move that the committee approve R277-123 process for members of the public to report violations of statute and board rule draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. In addition, directing staff to prepare, what would you call that, Debbie?
Materials.
Prepare additional supporting materials illustrating changes in what could I say, Ben? Oh, no. I thought maybe you had perfect language to give me. So illustrating changes between current policy and 120 and the proposed draft. I think she's tracking. She knows what I'm. There you go. There's my motion.
Any discussion to the motion? Not. Vice Chair Bollinger?
Yeah, thank you. Just a comment. I mean, the motion's been made. I would have wished we could have worked through some of these things because I think some of these things are minor. I am worried about if it's ready to go or not. I also understand the concern about the timeline. I also just experienced the LRBI for the gazillionth time, so I am concerned this is gonna tell them. But if it does, right? If we spend 4 hours in a board meeting and it comes back to committee, it does. But for that reason, I don't feel like it's quite ready to go, so I would vote against this.
Yeah, I'm going to speak in favor of the motion. Well, I'm going to speak in favor of the motion just because I think that it doesn't preclude us from doing what we said we wanted to do, which was following the model that I would say we saw for the LRBI final draft. You know, when that was listed before the committee, I was convinced that that would be a several hour discussion, and it really wasn't. I mean, we got here, it was spoken to, and it was passed, I believe, unanimously. And so my hope is that we can do something similar here where the concerns, big or small, are addressed, and that we have the best proposed rule possible that we can present to the board. I thought we had that on 2005, but we didn't. And that could be naivete, but I do think our best work comes when we hear from everybody. And so I just want to say that I hope that we will get together and let's take a look at the rule and put the best pieces together. So if there are no other comments or questions, then we're ready for a vote. The motion before the board, it's a substitute motion that the committee approve R277-123, process for members of the public to report violations of statute and board rule draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading, and direct staff to prepare additional support materials illustrating changes between current policy and the proposed draft. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So those opposing the passage were Board Member Lear. Those voting no were Board Member Lear and Vice Chair Bollinger. We can move on to the next item. Okay. So the next item is item 1.9, R277-303, Educator Preparation Programs, Amendment and Continuation, and Director Rasmussen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this rule is up for its 5-year review, and so we need a motion to continue. There is one substantive amendment that staff is proposing on this rule that you'll find near the end. It's on, I'm scrolling down trying to find it myself. It's on lines 171 to 175. And what it does is essentially it makes it so that a consortium of accredited private schools can create an Apple program to share amongst their schools. As the rule currently stands, only a private school individually may have an Apple program. This would allow a group of them to form an Apple program. So that's the only change. Other than that, we just asked the committee to continue the rule for another 5 years. Happy to answer any questions you have on that rule.
Yeah, so my question, I don't know if Dr. Height might be in a better position to answer this, but what gave birth to this idea? Like when I read it, I thought it was interesting, and I was just wondering, how did this come about? Thank you.
Sure. Malia Hyde, Executive Coordinator of Educator Licensing. This idea came about from really schools trying to work together to support their individual educators to obtain full licensure. And operating an Apple program requires a lift. And so this way they are able to share that lift by combining their efforts to support their teachers.
Was there an application made like from the sector, or was this like, did we come up with the idea and say this would
Yes.
be a good idea, or was it the
This-
field saying? Thank you.
Yeah, this was a request from the field. We had a number of private schools who wanted to do this. And so we are trying to make a pathway for that to happen.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Height. Vice Chair Hart.
Uh, uh, Others can form consortiums already. So this is just including private schools. That's correct, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So like, for instance, the charter organization is basically operating under this way. It just, and public schools can, the traditional LEAs can already do this, right?
Yes.
So this is just allowing that third group to do it as well. Okay.
Correct.
Board Member Lear.
So, and I'm just in full disclosure, looking at this, thinking about this for the first time. I'm wondering if it's the board's role to facilitate a consortium of private schools. Have you consulted with the AAGs?
So it is the board, under the board's discretion, to determine educator preparation programs. And since Apple is an educator preparation program that leads to a license, which is given by the board, then the board does have the right to determine who can provide an educator preparation program.
And again, just in the spirit of discussion and processing this, if it's your belief, and you didn't ever say you consulted with the AAGs on this,
No.
did you not? Okay.
No.
It might be something the board can do. I guess I'm also asking, it's something the board should do, given our resources, our capacity. Do you feel like our Apple programs are under your well running and under your control, and in a way that you feel like one more is not going to make much difference? Or so I'm kind of asking a multi-layered question, if it's
Sure.
okay if she responds to that.
Yes, Chair, thanks. I believe that our staff is fully capable to support this kind of an expansion. I think it is in the best interest of the board to provide as wide of a pathway and a pipeline for teachers to become fully licensed in the state of Utah. We have other private schools, institutions of higher education, Brigham Young University, Westminster College, Westminster University, that also provide the service to public education. And so this is, I think, not only is it within our capability, but also a service to the field.
And one more, just follow up if that's okay. Understanding that private schools are not bound by the same rules. The educators, the employees of private schools are not bound by the same rules. Arguably don't even have to follow the teacher standards.
While that is correct, the school is not required to.
Right.
If they participate in an Apple program, then their program is required to prepare that educator to meet the Utah Effective Teaching Standards. And they must have a mentor teacher that is a professionally licensed teacher under the state board. So there are additional requirements of individuals who participate in an Apple program that are in excess of what is required of a private school necessarily.
In fact, not just in excess, but might be contradictory. Private school employees
potentially.
can talk about religion. They can promote a religion.
Yes.
They can
Mhm.
they can discriminate, in fact, which feels contrary to what a public school teacher has been strictly directed to do,
Mhm.
especially as of late, which troubles me some. I get the desire to help develop teachers, but I'm concerned about the contradiction in what word is it I'm looking for? In requirements of literally those teachers.
Sure, Chair, if I may. I think one of the big differences is we're talking about employment differences. So a public school employer has to require that they abide by all of the board rules and all of the statutes that relate to public education. A private school employer isn't bound by those same rules. However, a professionally licensed educator is still bound to live up to all of the educator standards and the educator ethics independent of their employer.
And that creates a bigger,
We
well,
took action yesterday on an educator who worked with the
Yeah.
private school.
it's kind of an inherent conflict. Thanks. It's just been an interesting kind of exchange. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
I'm done. I'm
Oh,
finished. Thank you.
Vice Chair Bollinger?
Yeah, just a question, if I may. Dr. Height, just as a clarification, we have previously allowed private schools to be part of the Apple program. This is just adding an addition where they can have consortium of them or a group of them where they might work together to have the same process, not just adding in the opportunity for private schools to engage in this. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And that's been in board rules since 2019.
Yeah, I was ready to make a motion. We can still obviously discuss, but I wanted to put a motion on the floor. That I move that the committee approve, where'd it go? Is it that one? Approve R277, 303 Educator Preparation Programs Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading.
So the motion on the floor is that the committee continue and approve R277-303 Educator Preparation Programs Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading. I think we've already discussed it. All those in favor, aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you. 2 items. One, we do have, is it Heidi Elder from Weber? So Alder, she's on the phone. She would like to address item 313. We normally do public comment at the beginning. We have been advised by board leadership that the committee chair has discretion to do that. But I want to defer to the committee. I don't have any opposition to Heidi speaking and addressing this matter as a form of public comment. Thoughts from the committee? Vice Chair
If I may,
Bollinger?
Chair, I'm not opposed to that. And I think if we're going to do that, it would be nice to have her be able to speak now so she doesn't have to wait. But I would maybe request that we could take a break after that public comment.
That was my second item.
Okay.
Like you stole my thunder, right? But it will accept that recommendation. So Ms. Alder, are you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, let's have her speak and then, yes,
Okay, thank you.
it's our
Thank-
understanding.
Go ahead.
No, it's our understanding you wanted to address R277-313 student support licensing areas of concentration.
Yes, and thank you so much for
Okay.
allowing me to jump in. I apologize that I wasn't at the beginning during public comment. Thank you. I appreciate your time. My comments will be short because actually all I want to say is to ask the committee to consider holding this rule until other attorneys and practitioners have had an opportunity to really dig in and look at the practical application of the definition of mental health services. The definition was changed, I understand, in draft 2 from the version that was intended to come to the board or to the committee today. And in the last 48 hours, there hasn't been a lot of time to take a look at the definition proposed in draft 2 to determine if it is comprehensive enough to cover what we believe is intended by HB 281 and also by the Licensing Act in statute. Also, I wanted to take some time and talk to some practitioners and other attorneys about the implication of the removal of the last few lines. That would be lines 95 through 97, which takes out the provision that a school psychologist or school social worker who is dual licensed can provide mental health service. That seems to restrict the role of school psychologists and school social workers beyond what I understand HB 281 to allow. They're listed as authorized personnel allowed to provide restricted services, and the removal of those lines, which was in a suggested amendment in draft 1, raises some questions about what they would be allowed to do and not to do. And I think that that creates some confusion for our school psychologists and school social workers licensed under the State Board of Education. At this point, I wish I had more suggestions with regard to specifically how this would impact and also maybe some suggested changes. I don't, and so that's why I am asking the committee respectfully to hold this rule until there has been a further opportunity for some school attorneys and school practitioners to look at it and maybe provide feedback to this committee about how it would impact the work in schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like to bring the committee back to order for our next agenda item, which is 1.10 R277313 Student Support Licensing Areas of Concentration. And I believe, is it Deputy or
This is mine.
Director Rasmussen?
Thank you, Chair. This rule is a follow-up to House Bill 281 from the session, which clarified some of the requirements for mental health services. This rule specifically provides requirements for 3 license areas of concentration. And so staff has worked together to clarify as a follow-up to the rule, how that should look as a follow-up to the bill, how that should look in this rule. So we have Malia Height from licensing here. We also have student support staff as well who can answer any questions you have on the changes.
Okay. So let me, I mean, it's a committee and the Roberts rules are not applied strictly in committee per our bylaws. But I do think it's appropriate to have a motion on the table. And so I would just put the motion that has been recommended, just so that we can speak to that motion as part of our guidance. So the motion before the committee is that the committee approve R277-313, Student Support Licensing Areas of Concentration, Draft 1, on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second final reading. And again, that's just for purposes of having a motion on the table. So would any committee members like to speak to the motion or elements thereof? Vice Chair Bollinger?
Thank you, Chair. Been having a lot of discussions about the draft 1 and draft 2, and we heard in public comment there's some concerns about maybe some confusion that is just been unintentional and the way that we are writing the rule. My understanding is, as Director Rasmussen was mentioning, the changes are coming from HB 281. We want to make sure that we're honoring what our legislators have set forth. The concern is that when they use the word mental health services in code, they didn't necessarily define it. And so that's kind of leaves us to have to try to define that. And it does get a little bit muddied in the waters. And so really what we want to do is make sure that our mental health providers or our service providers in our schools are still following within the scope of law and within the scope of their licenses. And the way that this is written, it gets a little bit confusing because we have school counselors, school psychologists, and social workers, which they have different roles in a school. So we do absolutely want to be clear that they have to stay within the scope of their services, but we want to make sure that we're also making sure that they're following the law and the code. So I would like to make a couple of amendments to help clarify those pieces, if I may.
Just for purpose of clarification, this is draft 1.
Yes, this is draft 1.
Oh, you're working on draft 1.
Yeah, I'm just reading the motion that was in the, so I'm just leaving it up to the committee. I just wanted the committee to know if they want to make substitute, now would be the time. If they don't want to be working from draft 1.
I think we're going to work from draft 1. Yeah,
Okay, Vice Chair Bollinger?
Yes, thank you. So on that draft 1, then I would like to make a motion to amend that the committee amend draft 1 to strike lines 22 through 29. And then add mental health services has the same definition as practicing mental health therapy contained in subsection 5860 10217. So basically, we try to define mental health services, and then we try to define practicing mental health therapy. But really, what we mean by mental health services is the same as what's in code.
And do you want to speak to that motion? Or did you already do that, Vice Chair Bollinger? Okay,
I
Vice Chair
would,
Hart.
I would like to speak in support because, and I'm even looking at draft 2, what was changed there is services were provided by authorized personnel who work within the scope of their licenses. We're basically saying the same thing. We're just defining what the scope of their license is in code, correct? So it's saying basically what draft 2 does, but it's doing it even more precisely by pointing to the actual code, which I think is where I think overall we need to provide our practitioners clear lanes. And the more that we can point to direct code on this, I think the safer they will feel.
Okay, so the motion, I don't see any other lights, so the motion currently before the committee is that the committee amend draft 1 to strike lines 22 through 29, and after line 29, add mental health services as the same definition as practicing mental health therapy contained in subsection 58-60-102 paren 17. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Vice Chair Bollinger.
Thank you, Chair. It was also brought to my attention that specifically lines 45 and 76 provide confusion in the role of a school counselor. And we know that school counselors are not providing mental health therapy. It's not under the scope of their license. But I think to be clear, it would be good for us to say what they can do. So I would like to make an amendment on draft 1, or make a motion for an amendment, if I may.
Please.
So I would like to make a motion that the committee amend draft 1 to strike line 45, and in line 76, strike not provide restrictive services and add provide services in a school as defined in Rule R277-306 in section 53G-9-901. And what this does is then that allows us to say what a school counselors may do, which is in line with the law and with board rule. Just makes it a little bit more clear what they can do, so then they also better understand that.
So what we're saying is we're taking away the language as you can't do this, but this is what you can do. That's my understanding of the change. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Would anyone like to speak to the motion? Seeing no lights, the motion currently before the committee is that the committee amend draft 1 to strike line 45, and in line 76 strike not provide restricted services and add provide services in a school as defined in Rule R277-306 and section 53G-9-901. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing no opposition, that motion passes unanimously. Any other amendments or discussion to this?
So
Vice Chair Hart.
yeah, I have concerns about line 30 and psychoeducation. What again, I put on my hat as a practitioner. What does that fit? Like, I'm not comfortable with that. What does that mean? Can we say it in a more plain way, whatever that is? Because I'm not clear. I'm not sure that we actually can. Is there a member of staff that could help me understand?
It's my understanding that the concern with psychoeducation was that the definition of psychoeducation includes therapy. And so if only licensed individuals can provide therapy, does psychoeducation allow non-credentialed individuals to administer therapy through that particular term? I think that was the concern.
Well, yeah.
And so are you looking just to redefine it or to strike it?
I wanted more information, but I feel like it is confusing.
So Chris Ann Lewis, Student Services Coordinator at USBE. The psychoeducation does not include providing therapy. It's providing education surrounding the provision. So it would be talking to family students about what services are available and clarifying that information. It's not providing groups, it's not providing individual therapy or individual services.
So would it be possible just simply to say, I mean, where is it in this rule other
So
than?
the only place, if I may, that
Yeah.
it's used in the rules, it says that someone with a student support license area may provide psychoeducation to parents regarding prevention and mental health related topics. That's the only place it's used in the rule.
So it's information.
So my concern is that I'm looking at these definitions, and albeit it's on the internet, but several of them are saying psychoeducation is a therapy intervention that involves a therapist providing their client with information about their diagnosis, symptoms, or the method of treatment used. This one is from the AI, how it pulls all the top definitions. Psychoeducation is a therapeutic intervention. So again, with information about the mental health condition, its treatment and coping strategies of the particular ailment. So I'm concerned that if therapy is what the legislature was trying to make sure was only administered by licensed individuals, by saying psychoeducation as we have it, is that going above and beyond what the legislature intended? Director Rasmussen, your light is on.
So I was just going to comment, you're pointing to these definitions that are outside of the rule when we've got a specific definition within the rule. So this trumps whatever is used in the field for our purposes. So if you don't like the definition of the rule, that's another thing, but you shouldn't worry about how others are defining psychoeducation in different contexts.
But
Can I?
I really want to respond, but Vice
go
Chair
ahead.
Hart, no, go ahead.
Well, I'm just pointing out that our definition says means the process of providing education and information to those seeking and their family members, which that seems to indicate students and their family members. But then if you go down to where we actually use it, it says we can only provide it to family members. So like we're saying that's what it is, and then we're saying you can't do it. Why wouldn't we just strike the definition and then put in the actual where we use it, just say plain English, we can provide mental health information to families? Why do we even need to bring in psychoeducation? Because the reason that we're defining it is so we can say it later on, but we don't need to say it later on. All we need to say is we can provide information. I'm just saying it's an extra complication that the definition as we define it seems to imply students and their family members. And then later on we say, well, you can't do it. So take it out. And then if you'll scroll down to where we use it,
saying they can do it.
What line is that, Vice Chair?
We say,
56.
provide professional learning to staff and information to parents regarding prevention and mental health related topics. Wouldn't that be saying the same thing? I'm putting staff on the spot. Is there anything else to psychoeducation outside of prevention and mental health topics? Yes. Yes. And then take the definition out. Strike lines and then amend. Yes, I would like to make a motion that the committee strike lines 30 to 32 and amend line 56 to replace psychoeducation with information.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bollinger.
And this might be a question to, well, actually, do you want to speak to this? Does staff want to speak to her motion before?
No, the question was just, would staff like to address the proposed motion?
I think we're okay with replacing psychoeducation with information. I think that our main concern is that those families have all the information that they need and the students have all the information that they need in order to consent to services. So I think we are okay with that replacement language.
If it stops you from being able to do something, I'd like to know.
No.
But if we can replace regular English, or replace a psychobabble with regular English, that would be fabulous.
We are okay with that,
Okay.
with replacing it with information. That wouldn't have a material effect on practice.
Thank you, Vice Chair Bollinger.
Yeah, just a clarifying question to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I do know that we all believe that parents are the first teachers of their children. And there are some parents that when their child is having some mental health issues, does need support or training to understand. I know some of our districts provide some family education centers and opportunities for parents to sign up, obviously with consent. I'm just want to be clear, if we change this language, does this prevent them from providing those services?
No, not in my mind. I think that, again, I agree with you. And I want to emphasize that our primary goal with this section is that we want to make sure that everyone surrounding that child, that the parents have that information, that the child knows what they're working on when we're providing those services. And, the wording doesn't necessarily change that. We're still able to collaborate and consult with those parents in the way that we would want.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Lear.
And I would support this change so long as, well, let me start. I'm trying to decide where to start with this. I support this change. I think it's important to differentiate between information that school people who are experts and who have information that can be helpful to families, that we're speaking, that the education folks are speaking to parents, they're speaking to adults. So I don't want it confused with, we're nervous about them giving this information to children. They're giving it to adults. And I'm hoping you're saying, and I know we're kind of belaboring this, but I'm hoping you're saying that these experts could give that information to the adults without reservation about, is this psychoeducation? Is this forbidden? I hope they understand, both the staff people and the parents, that this is completely appropriate. And you
Yeah.
feel like it is.
Yes, and I think that language gets at that. And I guess I just want to emphasize as well that this information, formerly known as psychoeducation, it's it's really important that the students, that the children that are involved in this also at a developmental level understand, the purpose of the services that are being provided, and that they're taking responsibility and have a voice in that as well. So we want to make sure that whatever language is there includes that the students will also be a part of this process and receive that information at a developmental level.
It just says to parents. Is that too
I
narrow?
think up above we have in the definition that it includes students.
But that's going away. I thought I heard someone say. Psychoeducation means that the process for education for those seekers and their family members. So is on line 30, is that did you moved to strike that, didn't you, Molly?
Yes. But it says it.
And the only thing says, and then the other line only says,
Can we call up Vice Chair Hart's motion? And amend line 56. It says to parent, yeah, so if you read line 56, provide professional learning to staff and psychoeducation to parents. So it would be limited to parents in line 56.
Yeah, we need to be able to talk to students.
I'm going to recognize Vice Chair Bollinger because I didn't make a formal motion. That was just sidebar.
Yeah, my only concern, I just think if we do that, we just need to make sure we stay within the scope of their job. So then it kind of it differentiates again between what counselors can talk to people about or students about and what our psychologists and licensed therapists could talk about.
Vice Chair Hart?
If you'd pull up the motion, I think there's a refinement that, there you go, you already had it. And then add within the scope of their licensure. Which we have already clarified is from code. Yep. That would be an amendment. I hope that's friendly. Well, I guess I amended my own.
Not seeing any objection to the amendment from the committee. Would anyone like to speak to the amended motion? I just see people like reading and yeah, so I want to.
So do I need to use the word remaining? Is there a word missing? Is that what you're saying?
I think one thing that I do just want to point out here is that in the code, that it does specifically say informing students and parents of the availability of a restricted service. So we could reference that here as well.
Ooh. That's a good idea.
So I'd ask the maker of the
Chair.
motion.
I was just gonna say, I would probably move the family part to the end so that it reads, provide professional learning to staff and information regarding prevention and mental health related topics to families within the scope of their license.
That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
So we'll wait till that motion is.
How do I
typed down.
change the motion to read that?
To read and then have.
Oh, yeah, just have it. in context.
Strike parents. Add the end. Families. To families.
We have to revisit.
Regarding prevention, something. Just families and that.
To parents.
Vice Chair Bone, do you just want this in the form that it would appear in the rule? Yeah, we'll ask Director Rasmussen if he can put that together.
Were you trying to do that, Elise, or should I? Okay.
Because this is like a Rubik's Cube puzzle at this time. So if you could have all the colors on the same side, that would be helpful.
May I ask a follow-up question while they're getting that queued up?
Please.
With it restating now, and maybe this is to Coordinator Lewis, with it says related topics to families, does that mean, I know we had talked about using the word family, so it includes the students and families, but does that mean that we're not able to provide any information to students without the parents there as a family?
That's a great question. And I think it depends what you're defining, how you're defining that. Because we can provide students with the information that there are mental health services available. So for example, a staff member could go into a classroom and do a lesson about Safe UT and the availability of those resources, and that would not require parental consent. But if there were any direct services that were required for that student or that were recommended, that would go through the parents.
So I guess my question would be, do we need to clarify students separate from parents to help people understand that? Or will they inherently understand it by just the wording families? That's my concern.
Member Lair, are you going to make your motion on that, on consent? I think that might address it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that would fix everything. So if you could just share that with us, we would be.
Oh.
Accomplish the same thing by, at the end of this back and forth on.
Well, let's do this because I believe we have two motions on the table now. So let's address the first one made by Board Member Hart, which in context, thank you. So the motion to amend, Board Member Hart, if you could take a look at what's highlighted in pink and then the context, let us know if that's what you intended.
That is what I intended.
Okay, is there any comments or questions on that motion? Vice Chair Bollinger.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the word families and make sure, I just want this to be clear to LEAs of what they can do. So again, just a question, if I'm an LEA, I'm confused if I can talk to students.
Would it help to say to students and families?
Yes.
That's what the law says.
Then let's say students and families. If that's exactly what the law says, let's say it. Yes, then please change it to students and families within the scope of it.
Okay, not seeing any lights. The motion before the board is that the committee strike lines 30 to 32 and amend line 56 to replace psychoeducation with information, strike to parents, and add at the end to students and families within the scope of their licensure. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Not seeing any, that motion passes unanimously. If we could go to the motion made by Board Member Lear. Any comments or discussion on that motion? Board Member Lear?
I pretty much spoke to it. I think when I was thinking about this earlier in the week, now I think about it, I think I maybe got a little bit ahead of, this was a more focused rule that's really about licensure. But if it helps clarify the information that goes to families, and it helps the practitioners feel comfortable about what they can say and to whom, then I think it's okay to add here. So yes, I think adding it adds to the comfort level for employees and perhaps even parents.
Okay, thank you. And Vice Chair Bollinger, I see you have a light on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's important to make sure our teachers know what, in the schools and the LEAs all know what they can and can't do. So I do see the importance of this. My only question would be in that first section, and this was brought to my attention from the original, from the draft 2, when it was kind of talking about the same thing with the 53G -9-902, is when it says that the way it's written, it says permission prior to working with students. I'm just concerned because my understanding is that in the case of an emergency or a situation that one of our service providers could meet with a child in that type of a situation, but to continue services, they would need to get consent. Can you speak to that, and would there be wisdom in clarifying that?
Bring up 902. If they can bring up 902, that may include,
Right.
that may include that exception. Can you bring that up too? While you're
Fix that just by adding a couple of commas.
Ooh, 902.
You have here 7G.
Yeah, that's 7902. You want 9902.
902.
You have to go to the bill because it isn't code yet.
Oh, okay.
HB 281.
281. Line 1. Here comes the village. We got this. 125.
There we go. See, 127.
So I guess the only concern is the way that it's written. Do we have to say except for as required in section? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, it's confusing. This was brought to me by an LEA saying the way they read it was, now we're changing the rule to say they can't do it without having to go to the code. If we're trying to be clear on our rule.
Well, the rule, it's in accordance with this.
You have to show them the Google Doc. It's not in the rule. Sorry, Elise.
My understanding is that before she's not giving you law, engaging in generalized criticisms.
That's always a dilemma.
25, but also in 70. No, you go back.
Which allows 902.
I'm just wondering if we say, which allows in accordance. I'm just wondering.
Amanda's making the point, and I don't need to speak for her, but that because this is new, that those in the field may not understand that this exception is still allowed for under the new law. Is that so? To be extra helpful, I don't, well, and I think what she was looking for, and this would be sort of a rule writing question. What she's looking for is to actually use the words of or to point out that there's an exception within the new law for.
We could change in accordance with to where required by.
Yes, that.
No, that's not my point, but I don't know. It's more that she was looking to say, to actually put the exception in the rule so that educators would not be confused, would not misunderstand that they're allowed to do that still. And the law says that.
And we could do a paragraph 2 that says notwithstanding paragraph 1. We could spell
Well,
Yeah.
let me take it back a step. In terms of rule writing, because I remember what Deputy Stallings would always say, which is don't quote the rule. So
The statute.
the statute, excuse me. So taking it back to there, in terms of what the guidance is when it comes to rule writing, should we do that or shouldn't we do that? I mean, this committee can do what it wants, but I just want to know foundationally, what is the general advice from?
And you're right that that's the general advice. And I think by pointing the field to the statute, that's what we would normally do. But if there's a concern that the field would miss something, the board has the discretion to put more specifics if they feel it's warranted.
And in
It's just
fact-
not the general practice.
And in fact, we did that yesterday with a particular statute that this doesn't mean you have to, this means you might or you might not. And we, in fact, provided extra guidance in that. So it's general advice, but not controlling advice or dispositive, let's say that. So I think Amanda's in a better position to know if that would be helpful than I am.
I'm okay with, and again, it's just advice, but Board Member Lee, you are the maker of the motion. So I would ask if you would like to amend it. And the only reason I'm pushing this along is we do have one more matter listed, and I found out we have to revisit a matter. So
Yes. Okay. Do you want to try it, Molly, or can I?
I just think we need to be able to. Thank you. But I just think we need to be able, we can, in the same number of words, hint that there is an exception. So we could say, prior to working with students, except as permitted in accordance with section. And that hints that there is an exception that you can go look for.
we call
know what
that
I
an
mean? Like-
Easter egg in.
Well,
That's what we're
that
doing
way
now
we-
for our LEAs. We
Re-
are.
It is, it's saying, oh, then in my brain, I'm like, okay, I'm still permitted to do that. But I didn't add a whole nother paragraph to it.
No, I agree. I think that's a good.
And that's a fine in terms of if you're asking me about this, amending this motion, yes, I think
Would
that's
that be
fine.
okay?
Vice Chair Bollinger, does that address your thoughts and concerns?
It does. It just because this is a new law, the LEAs were concerned that the original wording
But they
was
have to
confusing. So I
do
think this
that
is a
in the-
perfect clarification. So
the
thank you.
Privacy Act and a number of other things too. So I don't think that's.
Has that amendment been made? Okay, Board Member Lear, does the motion on the board reflect the motion as you intend to make it or intended to make it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, the motion before the committee is that the committee amend draft one to add, beginning at line 82, R277-313-4, parent consent. One, an educator with a student support license area shall obtain written parent permission prior to working with students, except as permitted by section 53G-9-902. Number two, a school or LEA shall provide training to educators on the parent consent requirement, and B, ensure compliance by the educators employed by the LEA. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Any other matters that need to be addressed regarding R277-303? Seeing none, let's move on. Oh, wait, we have to vote on the
Underlying.
underlying motion. Do we have someone willing to make that motion?
Didn't you make it to start out with?
Oh, did I? Oh, it's our new procedure to put a motion on the
You
table.
did, here.
Thank you. Like I'm confusing myself. Thanks, Ben. Thank you. So the motion on the table is that the committee approve R277-313, student support licensing areas of concentration, draft one as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, committee. The remaining matter on the agenda right now is 1.11, R277-631.
Can we revisit 100 real quick
You wanna do
before
that?
we
Oh,
jump to
yeah.
that?
So, oh, sorry, Turn the time over to Director
Yeah.
Rasmussen.
At least I have a motion highlighted there if you just passed it. So I apologize on R277-100. One of the amendments that member Carey made was to add a definition for accountability practice. He asked me to bring that definition from R277-609. And when I did that, I neglected to see that there were 2 paragraphs that made up that definition. And so I only gave you the first one. So the language highlighted would be a motion to add the other part of that that definition in and then to reapprove the draft. If somebody could make the highlighted motion, did I explain that? So it make sense?
Yep.
I'll put it on the floor. I move that the committee add to the definition of accountability practice, B, some practices include adapting instruction to increase behavior engagement plans and restorative practices, and approve the amended draft of R277-100 on first reading and forward a recommendation to the board to approve on second and final reading.
So the motion before the board is that the committee add to the definition of accountability practice. B, some practices include adapting instruction to increase behavior engagement plans and restorative practices, and approve the amended draft of R277-100 on first reading and forward a recommendation to the board to approve on second and final reading. Is there any discussion to that? Seeing none, we're ready for a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Director Rasmussen. Moving on to 1.11 R277-631 student toilet training requirements. And this is Director Rasmussen.
Yeah, so this is everybody's favorite rule, the toilet training rule. We're bringing this back because there was updates to these requirements by the legislature during the recent session. They changed the requirement from just kindergarten enrollment to enrollment in a K-12 school generally. And so you'll see the changes in this rule, I think, just starting on line 32. We've updated the implementation year for the changes, and then clarified some things regarding special ed in conjunction with this. And then the final, on 44, because students, once they're in first grade, are mandatory to attend school, we've added language that if you deny a student enrollment to first grade or above, you have to look at what other services can be provided, because they are entitled to be educated once they are of mandatory school age. And then finally, the language has been stricken regarding LEA policies that was taken out of statute. We are happy to answer any questions you have on this rule.
Board Member Lear.
I'm asking, I don't know if Associate Superintendent Leah is not here.
She is here.
Is not in the room, though. Oh, there you are. Sorry. Is the May satisfactory on line 36 to satisfy IDEA?
Chair,
Please.
Leah Voorhees, Deputy Superintendent. So yes, the May is satisfactory because of the word suspected down a line lower.
Any other questions from the body? I don't want anyone to feel rushed. But seeing none, we're ready for a motion if someone would like to make that, Board Member Hall.
Make the motion that the committee approve R277-631 student toilet training requirements draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
So the motion before the committee is that the committee approve R277-631 student toilet training requirements draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes unanimously. We take one final motion. Okay, all those in favor? That appears unanimous. We're adjourned. Thank you.
See.